Welcome to episode 194 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak life, encouragement, and truth into the minds and hearts of educators and get you energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm going to talk about how to have better work-life balance when teaching from home. Visit truthforteachers.com to get the transcript or find our Truth for Teachers podcast community on Facebook. Support for this episode is brought to you by PowerSchool. They know that in or out of the classroom, a little extra time goes a long way for teachers. Now with Schoology, PowerSchool brings together SIS, LMS, and assessment technology in one place, empowering teachers with more time to focus on what matters most. Find out how teachers are using technology to unlock student success at powerschool.com/time for teachers. A big thanks also to ViewSonic. They've been a dedicated part of the educational community for over 30 years. They want to help the millions of teachers and students who are finding themselves trying to learn from home. And they're currently offering free access to their My Viewboard digital whiteboarding software, giving teachers all the distance learning tools that they need in order to continue to conduct classes. And now My Viewboard includes new features released this April designed just for virtual classrooms. Check it out today and get access at myviewboard.com/distance-learning. So we're talking in this episode about work-life balance when teaching from home. And yes, I do believe such a thing is possible. My advice is to treat this like the start of a new school year and be prepared to work longer hours in the beginning. There will be far more teaching of routines and procedures than you would normally be doing at this time of year. So the extra time is to be expected. You're setting up a new normal with an entirely different approach to teaching with brand new expectations for students. Additionally, kids and parents are more likely to be distracted and overwhelmed right now. And that will be particularly true if, in addition to all the other upheaval and inconsistencies in their lives, the kids now have multiple teachers all using different tools and having different protocols, and it's all these new systems to learn. So expect to spend extra time answering questions and giving reassurances right now that you will be flexible with families and do what you can to make this simple for them. You will be able to taper off that additional support over the coming weeks. So if it feels like the beginning of the school year, I encourage you just embrace that. This is a time to work a little bit longer hours, at least as your school is starting to get started with distance learning. Try to focus on investing time into creating systems that will save you time later. I always tell 40-hour Teacher Workweek Club members not to expect to reduce their hours during the first few weeks of school because they need to invest time into setting up systems. The idea is to create a self-running classroom where routines and procedures are automated, so you're free to focus on teaching and learning. And the same thing applies now with the sudden switch to distance learning. Invest time into setting up systems and processes that will simplify your workload later on. Take extra time now to show kids how to submit assignments to you the way that you need them to be submitted, and showing kids how to get questions answered in a timely manner without you having to respond to hundreds of emails. Really take that time to set up those systems so that you're not constantly having to re-explain or do Band-Aid solutions from now to the end of the school year. Maybe just take an hour or so to step back from your workload and think through some time investment strategies. For example, if you're getting the same questions over and over, create a short screencast of yourself answering those questions. And then next time you're asked, you can just send folks the link to the screencast instead of typing out the response every time or re-explaining to every person who asks. If that cuts down the number of times you have to repeat yourself by even 50%, well, then it was worth the time investment. So don't just stay in triage mode. Try to step back, do some big picture work, and think about how you can fix the systems. You want to invest your time now so that you're not working so many hours once things are underway. I think it's important to mention here that you should speak up if your district is requiring too much. Particularly when it comes to synchronous teaching. We talk a lot about asynchronous teaching where people are not all online at the same time. If you are required to be online for hours a day with your kids and it's just too much for you, then know that that's probably too much for many kids and parents too. If you speak up, you may be surprised at the outcome. I've said in the previous 2 episodes that the majority of schoolwork that's done during this time should be done asynchronously, and it should be limited to a few hours a day max. We do not need kids and families trying to complete 6, 7, 8 hours worth of schoolwork a day right now. I will forever beat the drum that our number one goal during a global humanitarian crisis should be keeping students and staff healthy. If you are just getting through the day and trying to survive, then you've done enough. That is where the bar needs to be right now for teachers and families. We should not allow things to get more dire before we realize that academic rigor is necessarily lower on the list of priorities. We need to recognize now that focusing on physical and mental wellness is a preventative, life-saving measure. It is the most important thing for teachers and kids to do. This must be a time where we center on the whole teacher and the whole child. So insist on that from your school leaders. Set the precedent now that flexibility is non-negotiable. You have to have that. You will not try to carry on like everything is normal. You will prioritize your mental and physical well-being and that of your students above all else. It is not only the right thing to do for kids, it is the path to our collective recovery and survival. Now, there are a number of club members who have successfully been able to adjust their workloads with minimal effort. You may have seen the district in Wisconsin that required teachers to secure childcare for their own children so that they can be online the entire day for students. The public pushback to that was massive, and they walked that back almost immediately. But honestly, that's an extreme example. This doesn't have to turn into a national incident. Remember what I told you in my book, Fewer Things Better, about how to speak up with solutions rather than complaints and not assuming that your school leaders know what you need and are purposely disregarding it? That really applies now. Administrators and superintendents are not mind readers. They don't know what's on your plate at home, and what might seem obvious to you might not actually be to them. So here's 2 quick examples of teachers who have successfully had their remote teaching expectations altered when they felt like the workload was too much. In one district that was requiring teachers to conduct hours of live instruction every single day, they were supposed to be on Zoom for 6 hours a day, and it was just proving impossible to balance with caregiving for many teachers. Around 10 colleagues banded together, and they wrote an email to the superintendent with the subject line, "Teachers are parents first." And the expectations in their district were changed the next day. That's all it took. 10 teachers, 1 email, changed the teaching and learning conditions for the whole district. Another example, a handful of teachers who had a supportive administrator asked for a reduced workload, and they suggested a different approach that they thought would still be beneficial for their student population, but also manageable for teachers. Their administrator then went to the superintendent on behalf of her teachers, and the superintendent changed the expectations within 24 hours. That's all that it took for them. Advocating for yourself and students does not have to involve national press and this, year-long union-backed formal protest. Start by just asking for what you need. Just ask. Many school leaders understand the importance of supporting teachers right now. And even those who don't are not looking for that negative press that comes from doing anything that endangers the health of their employees or students or kids. The public is very sensitive to that right now, and they're not going to stand for it. If what you're being asked to do is too much for you, then it is likely a burden on kids and families too. So it's worth asking for change rather than just defaulting into, well, the district said, oh, well, we have to, oh, the superintendent's making us. Nothing is written in stone right now. Ask for what you need. From there, try to focus on developing a minimum viable product, or an MVP, rather than trying to replicate everything you see in well-developed long-term online teaching initiatives. It takes months to years of planning to create a true distance learning program that will meet the needs of all learners. So don't hold yourself to that standard. Adjust your expectations for the reality of what we're doing here, which is short-term, crisis-initiated remote teaching. I've seen the recommendation floating around on Twitter to cut your expectations in half for how much curriculum you can realistically cover, and then cut it in half again. And even so, you may not be able to fit everything in. This is not a time to be overly ambitious in how much you can teach children. Even if you can handle the additional workload right now, that may not be true for you in the future, and it doesn't mean that your students and their families can handle it. Keep in mind also that a lesson that might only take 30 minutes of planning for face-to-face instruction may take you hours to build out in the form of reinventing curriculum, converting assignments to a remote format, recording videos, typing out explanations, typing out the answers to students' questions via email instead of just giving it verbally in class, and so on. So while you may have spent less time on lesson planning before, you may find that planning for these kinds of lessons now takes a lot more time. Therefore, you need to pace yourself when it comes to learning new tools and experimenting with different approaches. Do not try to learn and master everything at once in the middle of a global pandemic. Now, I guess the exception to this might be if your personality type really enjoys the distraction and finds the work energizing. So you have something that, you can really lose yourself in and it just distracts you from everything else that's happening, then maybe that could work for you. But let that be your guiding principle. If it's energizing for you, and it doesn't create additional expectations or responsibilities for other people, then go for it. Dive in, immerse yourself in it. But if the work is draining for you or for other people, then scale back. If you're in the 40-hour Teacher Workweek Club, or if you've read Fewer Things Better, then you know already about this MVP principle. It's something that I talk about a lot, particularly when it comes to lesson planning. And I think there has never been a more important time for it. A minimum viable product in lesson planning means to get the bare bones in place and try it out with students and then iterate, improve on it over time. There's no way to make a lesson to be exactly what all of your students need when you've never taught this way before. This process that you're in right now will require experimentation. There's no other way. There's no blueprint. We don't know exactly what works yet. You will discover what works for kids by trying out different approaches and iterating from there. First, make it work, and then make it work better. This MVP, minimum viable product, idea is especially important right now, given that district expectations are changing rapidly. They're putting one plan in place for the next 2 weeks, then they're reevaluating, then they're shifting again, and it can feel like continually moving the goalpost if you're trying to perform to the optimal standard every single time the expectations are changed. I've talked to teachers who have spent hours filming lessons only to discover then that they're not allowed to teach the new material. And I've also talked to some who have spent hours creating optional projects only to be told now they're mandated to teach the regular curriculum. So please do not sink a ton of time into creating things that you may not be able to use. Start with the minimum viable product. Get something in place for now, and you can improve over time as you get more comfortable, as your students get more comfortable, and as your district settles in on whatever the expectations are going to be for the remainder of the year. Now, it's also important to remember that you cannot replicate expectations from face-to-face instruction in an online format. So be careful that you are not spending excessive time on accountability for students. Your first priority right now in terms of your workload or in terms of anything should not be holding kids accountable for their work. Remember that you have no idea what life or death situations families are dealing with right now more than ever. It's always true, but it's exponentially more true right now, that there's all kinds of things going on in kids' homes that we just don't know about. So please do not spend your evenings and weekends calling parents about kids not showing up to virtual class or trying to enforce punishments on kids. There is a time and a place for that, and a global pandemic is not it. Similarly, I think it's important to adjust expectations for virtual classes. Kids do not need to dress up for a Zoom meeting. They don't need to maintain eye contact with the speaker. They don't need to make sure there's no interruptions from family members or pets. We can ask for these types of things in terms of, get yourself into a quiet place where you're not going to be distracted. But the norms for virtual meetings are always different than from face-to-face meetings. So really make sure you are examining your beliefs about what it means to hold students accountable. You might remember this as something that I called third rail issues in Fewer Things Better, where you have these issues that you feel like things that you have to do in order to make sure that kids aren't getting away with anything. Make sure you're not creating extra work for yourself and your students because you believe you have to enforce this policy or this rule and you can't, kids might take advantage if you don't do it. If there was ever a time to reimagine norms and let go of our attempts to control or micromanage students, this is it. So don't replicate expectations from face-to-face instruction right now in an online format. Let's dream up a better way. Let's dream up something that works better for teachers and kids. You don't need to spend all your time trying to enforce rules right now. On a related note, I think it's important to be flexible and gracious with families, but you don't have to try to make everyone happy. Some parents will not be happy with your approach to remote teaching no matter what you do. And this is also the case during your regular face-to-face instruction, right? You just cannot please them all. You're always going to be giving too much work for some families and not enough work for others, and some want more of this thing and others want less of this thing. That's normal when you're trying to work with a group of families. I advise really giving parents grace if they are overly demanding right now because they are very likely stressed and they're really worried about their kids. Try to be especially patient with those who feel like their kids are being required to do too much. Ease up on those expectations when you're asked to. However, you do not have to bend over backwards to please each person, particularly with the parents who are asking you to work harder. Make sure your approach is aligned with what your district or your union have put in place, and develop a solid, easy-to-understand rationale for your approach. So you can tell families, well, I'm choosing to do blank, or we're being asked to do blank right now, and we believe that this is going to be helpful to your child in the following ways, and outline why those choices were made and why the decision to do things differently than what the parent asked has been made. So they understand the reasoning there. Give them the rationale for it. Thank them for their understanding. Tell them this is a time where you're trying to completely reinvent instruction, and let them know that you appreciate their cooperation. If they still feel like you could be doing more, that's okay. They are entitled to that opinion. Be flexible, be gracious. Don't try to make everyone happy. Another thing that will be important for you to do in creating work-life balance when teaching remotely is to set office hours and let go of the guilt from not being available 24/7. I'm hearing from a lot of teachers right now who feel like, gosh, I just need to be checking my email constantly. I need to be calling students all the time. I need to be in constant communication with them because, families are hurting right now and there's a lot of confusion. And when you care about your students and your families, you want to be there for them. But here's the thing. You cannot be available 24/7. This is not just like a one weekend thing. We're in this for the long haul now. What's happening right now is going to be going on for at least several more weeks, probably to the end of the school year. And so you really have to think about what is sustainable for you. There is an overlap between what is best for kids and families and what is best for teachers. And that's always when I'm in all of my resources, everything that I've ever shared with you, that's always been my goal, to try to find that overlap, something that serves everyone. Because you really do have to think about sustainability for yourself. You don't want to burn yourself out during this time when you really need to be strong and healthy. And when I think about that guilt from not being available all the time, I think about doctors and nurses who are undoubtedly some of the most stressed and overworked as well as endangered folks right now. Even they have periods of time when they're allowed to be off the clock. And as much responsibility as you might feel right now, remember that your instruction for students is not literal life-saving care. You are not obligated to wake every 2 hours at night to check for text messages from students and parents. You have to work in shifts here, okay? Even the medical facilities are doing this. You're working in shifts. There is a time to be on the clock and a time to be off the clock. You cannot be on 24/7. And remember that kids and families should not be thinking about schoolwork in the evenings or weekends right now either. Everyone needs more time to rest and reset their adrenal system from that additional stress. I've heard from a lot of parents who have said, I'm getting like 3-4 emails a day from every single one of my kids' teachers, and I have multiple kids. So it's like 50 messages a day that I have to go through, and this one wants this and this one wants that. We don't need to be stressing kids and families out either. Sometimes we're giving them more communication thinking that it's being helpful, and actually it's just overwhelming. No one needs to be thinking about school 24/7 right now. Not you, not your students, not their parents. So my advice is to let families know your conference hours. These are hours when you are available online or via phone, whatever your communication method is, for immediate help. And then also let them know your work hours. So this is when you're sort of like on the clock. You'll be around checking email, you'll be instructing, planning, grading, and otherwise officially working. Your work hours are likely to be your contractual hours. So maybe, 7:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday to Friday. Your conference hours, those hours when you are available online for immediate help, might be something like 8 to 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. You might also offer additional conference hours in the evenings. Maybe you set aside 7 to 8 p.m. to respond to any chat or meeting requests and return emails. All of this, of course, is going to depend on how many hours you're expected to be delivering instruction. So for some teachers, conference hours might just be 1 or 2 hours a week. For others, it might be multiple hours a day. Introduce your office hours as something that you are doing on a trial basis. You don't have to know exactly what the right amount is right now. Let families know you are planning to adjust those hours as the weeks of remote teaching continue. So tell families you may scale back on these hours later. You may offer more upfront to give them additional support in the beginning when everyone's learning their routines and procedures and needs reminders about how to make this work. And then you might scale back later. Or maybe you'll move some of the time periods around and you'll realize that, actually first thing in the morning isn't the best time. I need to be doing it late afternoon instead. Let them know you'll be experimenting to accommodate their needs and your own family's needs as well. Remember that nothing we are doing right now is supposed to be permanent. So just figure out something that's workable for your home situation right now and something that is helpful for your students' families just right now, just for this week, and try it out. You could always adjust to something else next week. And keep in mind, too, that people email and send other messages whenever it's most convenient for them or whenever a question pops into their head. That doesn't necessarily mean that they expect an immediate response unless you train them to do so. So if families want to email you at 11 o'clock at night, let them. Maybe that's the best time for them. Maybe that's the moment when whatever it was they wanted to ask you suddenly resurfaced in their minds and they're like, let me just send this email off real quick. You then respond at a predetermined and pre-communicated time the following day. So they can contact you whenever. Let them know they are free to reach out 24/7. They can send you a message at any time. These are going to be the hours when you check those messages and you respond. Another tip for having better work-life balance when teaching from home is trying to work in a designated place or having some sort of visual do not disturb signal so that your family knows when you are, quote, at work. So if you have a room that you can use as your office during this time, even if it's just a dining room or a laundry room, something like that can help you set a boundary between work and home. Because when you're in that spot, your family members know you're working and they should minimize interruptions to you. When you leave that spot, then you're sort of leaving work behind. You're leaving thoughts about work behind as much as possible, and you're trying to be present with your loved ones. Now, obviously, this is not possible everywhere. So if you can't have a separate room or a separate area of your home, try to have another visual clue about when you can be interrupted by the other people you share your home with. So maybe it's turning on a particular lamp. Maybe there's a sign. Maybe there's some sort of signal like that that lets them know when you're concentrating and need to work and when it's okay for them to come and talk to you. I always recommend to club members that when they're working from home, they try to focus fully on work so they can just knock it out and be done. And I think that advice applies in many remote teaching situations as well. If you're trying to watch TV with your family members at the same time that you're lesson planning, and maybe you feel bad, like, I don't want to go into my bedroom and shut the door. I want to be out there with everyone else. Well, it's going to take you longer and you're going to be distracted. So often it's better to just do a single task, go to the other room, get the work done, and then come out and enjoy relaxing with your family afterward. Try to stick to this when possible, and of course, allow yourself lots of room for flexibility as needed, because every situation is different and every day is different. But I do recommend trying to create that boundary when this is where I'm working, this is when I'm not working, rather than trying to do both at the same time and not really feeling like you're doing either one very well. Another tip that can be helpful is to set up new morning routines that are energizing. I think one of the tough parts of this pandemic is not having any appointments or social engagements or fun activities, any kind of diversions that break up the work week and add an interesting rhythm to our days. All of that is sort of gone right now. It can feel a little bit like we're stuck in that Groundhog's Day movie, right? Where every day, every night are identical. And for teachers, this can mean being on the computer nonstop 7 days a week. So I recommend creating an energizing morning routine when you have these work days at home. It's the same way that I recommended having one when schools are open. There's a whole Truth for Teachers podcast episode on this, actually. It's episode 116. We'll give you ideas for creating a good morning routine. The idea is that you're doing something to care for yourself when you first wake up, instead of just endlessly scrolling through your phone or trying to dive right into work or caregiving. Personally, I am finding that a morning routine is even more essential now because starting my day by going online often means I'm faced with extremely grim and depressing news. I cannot expose myself to that immediately upon waking up. So I have a variety of routines that I choose from instead. Sometimes I read a book for a little while in bed and wake up slowly. Sometimes I get up and I do yoga. Sometimes I will call or box with a friend who I know is positive and uplifting. Sometimes I'll go for a quick walk. I don't like to do the exact same thing every day, but I do like having this menu of choices, like a toolbox of options that I can choose from, different things that I know are energizing for me and help me start my day on the right foot. And I can just pick whichever one works for me and my schedule that day. So I encourage you to create some sort of morning routine for yourself and include in that getting dressed and initiating some sort of physical signal that helps you get ready for the day mentally. So I have sort of a regular getting ready routine, and then I have a getting ready to work at home routine. So it's less when I'm just staying home. No one's going to see me. I'm not going out anywhere. But I'm still going to do things like when I first wake up, I'm still going to brush my teeth. I'm going to wash my face. I'm going to do the whole moisturizer skincare routine. I'm going to put my hair up in a bun. I'm going to change out of pajamas into something else, probably just yoga pants or sweats. It's less than what I would do if I were planning to go out in public and be professional. But it's more than what I would do on, say, a weekend where I might just stay in pajamas all day. So your morning routine will look for you depending on really whatever you need in order to feel ready for your day. Some people find that wearing quote, real clothes, putting on actual pants and a nice shirt or putting on makeup, something like that is essential for them. Other people don't care about that at all. Find something that works for you. But I found it really helpful to make sure that I am doing some sort of routine on weekdays and then having a different one on the weekends so that I'm not just in pajamas all the time, because it just gets sort of depressing for me personally. Another tip is to think about other daily routines that sort of break things up and create a level of structure that you personally need to thrive. So one thing might be taking a true lunch break. Give yourself at least 20 minutes to clear your head and eat. Step outside, get fresh air if possible. That kind of midday break is absolutely essential for my productivity in the afternoon, and I think it will benefit you too. Another thing to think about in terms of breaks and structuring your day is if you are teaching live classes via video, make sure you are building in lots of breaks for your kids and yourself, more than what you would build in during a regular school day. An entire day of Zoom meetings can feel way more taxing than a day of in-class meetings. So get everyone logging off for stretch breaks, for independent work, and for unstructured times really frequently throughout the day. My final tip for better work-life balance when teaching from home is to give yourself something to look forward to when school hours are over. Because your social activities are so limited at the moment, it is important to have something that you can be excited about at the end of your workday. It might be a relaxing dinner, maybe a good movie or a book or time for a hobby. It might be the same thing every day, or it might be something different from day to day. But it's important for your mental health to have a reward at the end of your workday. You don't get that sense of satisfaction from closing your classroom door and heading home and having that change of scenery. So there has to be some other signal to your body that you can rest and refocus on your life apart from work. Maybe you want to change out of your clothes, change into something else, maybe pajamas, maybe just other sweatpants, whatever, when you're done working. And give yourself some kind of activity that you're just really looking forward to and that signals to you, okay, the workday is done and now I get to be home and relax. If there is anything that we know for sure from this experience, it's that life is fragile and precious. So don't waste it being stressed out about work all the time or constantly trying to be productive. Enjoy your evenings and weekends. Do things that are nourishing for your body and soul. Your takeaway truth for the week ahead is this: prioritizing your own physical and mental well-being is not optional. It is a life-saving preventative measure. Self-care is not selfish. It is essential for managing stress and keeping your immune system functioning. Building in time for rest is important if you want to be able to keep doing all the wonderful things that you're doing for your students and your loved ones and your community. So ask for what you need. Make sure you're getting your needs met. We are going to get through this together. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it.